is in your pension pot waiting for you to pick it up when you retire. However, since 2014, the pension scheme changed and it's now what we call a career average scheme. And in the career average scheme, 1/49th of your annual salary is put into your pension pot each year. So from 2014 to now, which is 2024, 10 years, each year, 1/49th of your annual salary, not your final salary, your annual salary has been put into your pension pot. So everyone, if you've been here since 2014, should have 10/49ths of each of their annual salaries in there. The final salary section is known as Section A. The career average section is known as Section B. And when you get your pension statement, it will just basically have Section A added to Section B, and it will show you what your combined pension is going to be. So A plus B equals your pension. Whatever you've got in the final salary scheme is added to what you've got in the career average scheme, and that forms your pension. There are some slight different rules about it. I'm not going to get too technical about it. In the final salary section, you get an automatic lump sum of 3 times whatever your pension is. It's a tax-free lump sum. In the career average scheme, you don't automatically get a lump sum, but you can buy a lump sum by giving up part of your pension. You can give up to 25% of your pension. For each pound of pension you give up, you get a £12 lump sum. And that lump sum would be added, should you choose to take it, would be added on to the lump sum that you automatically get in the pre-2014 section. So it's one scheme in 2 sections. First scheme is final salary. Second scheme is career average. First scheme gives you a lump sum. Second scheme, you have to buy a lump sum. Everybody is now in the career average section of the scheme. So everybody has a retirement date of whatever their state pension age is. Now, overwhelmingly for everybody, that will be 67. So your normal pensionable age in the scheme is 67. You can leave earlier than 67. You can leave up to 10 years earlier. So you can leave from the age of 57 onwards. But for each year you leave early, your pension is reduced, and it's reduced by about 4% for each year you leave before your what we call the NPA, the normal pension age of the scheme. So if you were 57 and you left the scheme, you'd be leaving 10 years early. So you would lose 10 times 4%. So you would lose about 40% of the value of your pension if you left the full 2 years early. The way to look at that is, do you want £100 a week at the age of 67? Or are you happy to take £60 a week from the age of 57? People make choices in life, and some people just feel as though they've had enough and they want to go, and they've got other income and they want to go early, or they just couldn't be bothered staying until 67. But it's what we call end of career flexibility for everyone, so that you don't have to stay to the full 67. We have tiered contributions in the scheme. The amount you pay into the scheme depends on your salary. The lowest tier pays 5.5% of their salary into the scheme. The highest tier pays 12.5% of their salary into the scheme. And this does reflect the principle that those with the broadest shoulders should bear the greatest burden. So the higher paid pay more into the scheme than the lower paid do. And we just feel that's an issue of fairness amongst the scheme. There are lots of other benefits of being in the scheme. For example, I mentioned the tiered contributions are between 5.5% and 12.5%. However, if you are experiencing financial difficulty, you might have left work for maternity leave, you might have been off sick and been in no pay or something, rather than leave the scheme altogether, which we discourage everyone from doing, you can join the 50-50 section of the scheme, whereby you only pay 50% of your contribution. And whilst you're paying 50% of the contribution, you only earn 50% of the benefit of your pension. And it's a way of avoiding you leaving the scheme, reducing your contributions into the scheme until such time as you're back on your feet and your income has started going up again. So it's another little flexibility we've got in the scheme. The scheme also has death benefits. They vary between schemes. So I don't know which council you're all in, but some councils give a death grant and other councils provide a spousal pension. So you would have to check what your council offers. Those who offer a death grant, in the event of your death, you can have death in service. That does give you a pension for your nominated persons. This is if you die while you are working. Your nominated person will get a pension equivalent to 50% of the value of the pension that you would have got, and your children would receive a pension of 25% of the value that you would have got up until the age of 18 or up until the age of 23 if they are in full-time education. And you should all make sure by going on to the local government pension scheme website that you have the person or persons that you want to receive that pension nominated. If you don't nominate anyone, it leads to all sorts of difficulties. You'd have to go through probate, and that can take up to 4 years. You'd have to contest the will and all that. It's just a simple thing to fill in the form and make sure that the person or persons that you want to receive that pension when you die actually receive the pension. That's if you die in service. If you die after you have retired, some councils still do the same and give that pension. Other councils give a death grant, and the death grant is equivalent to 10 times your pension less the amount of pension you have already received. So let's say you retired at 67 and you died at 72, you would have received 5 years of pension. So the death grant, which is 10 times the pension, would be paid to you less the 5 years you have already received. So it's one scheme in 2 sections: flexible contributions, flexible retirement option, death in service and death in benefits, and a 50-50 section. There's also an ill health retirement section. If you feel as though you're too ill to work, there's a form that you fill in, you submit it with all your medical evidence, and an independent medical panel will judge as to whether you can carry on working or not, and it will make a decision as to whether to give you a tier 1 or tier 2 ill health pension. A tier 1 would be if you can't do your current job, but you could go on and do another job. A tier 2 would be if you weren't able to get another job at all, and they give you 2 slightly different levels of pension. So it's another benefit of being in the scheme. Okay. All your pension contributions are tax-free. When we take the 5.5% out of your wages to put in the pension pot, under normal circumstances, we tax everything that you've got and then take the pension contribution out. But how this scheme works is we take the pension contribution out and then tax you on the remainder. So you pay a little bit less tax and a little bit less national insurance than you otherwise would if you weren't in the scheme. It's another benefit of being in the scheme. There are ways to top up your pension. You can do what we call AVCs, where you set up a separate little pensions pot that runs alongside your pension. It's a savings scheme. The advantage of it is it's completely flexible. You can put in as much or as little as you want. You can change that each month. You can put in £1 one month and £100 the next month. You know, come Christmas, don't put anything in it, but then up it again. And your contributions to that are tax-free. Same principle that we take the money out of your wages and tax you on the remainder. And that money just gets invested in stocks and shares like everything else, and generates a return. And I know stocks and shares go up and down, but generally speaking, the AVC returns are generally higher than what you would get than if you invested, just put your money in an ISA or in a bank. So it's flexible and it's tax-free, and it's a way of saving an additional amount of money. Another way you can top up your pension is by additional pension purchase. You can, let's just say you've figured out your pension is going to be £9,000 a year. You can buy, and you can say to yourself, I can't live on £9,000 a year, I need £10,000 a year. You can buy the additional £1,000 per year, and it costs about 12 times whatever the additional amount is. So if you wanted an extra £1,000 a year, it would cost you around £12,000 as a one-off payment to get the extra £1,000. The most you can buy is £7,500, and that would cost you about £95,000. And you can pay that as a one-off. You can pay that in 12 equal installments, or you can pay that in equal installments from now until the date that you retire. Now, I know it seems a lot of money, £95,000 if you want that much, or if you wanted 5,000 because you're around 60,000. The amount that it could cost you is based on current interest rates and things, and it is round about 12 times the amount that you want. So the way to look at it is if you are going to live for more than 12 years from your retirement date, then you would be better off doing that. And a lot of people do it because they know they've got a lot of pension and they have capital that they might have inherited or that they might have been made redundant. And if that fits in for you, you can just go online and get more specific details. So it's a way of topping up your pension. And I think the last thing about the scheme that I want to say is in the event of you being made redundant, if you are aged 55 and over and you get made redundant, either compulsorily or you take voluntarily redundancy, then you get the full pension that you have accrued to date. You do not get the 4% per year reduction that I mentioned to you early. So overall, it's a defined benefit scheme. It gives you a known amount of pension. It's a tax-free method of saving. It has all these other benefits about the 50-50 scheme, death benefits, ill health retirement, lump sum, tax relief, additional pension purchase, all of these things. These are way better than anything you would get in the private sector and in just a normal, what we call a defined contribution scheme. So if you're not in the scheme, you ought to be. And if you're approaching retirement age, you should start making your plans, making sure that your details are up to date by just going on the LGPS website, logging into whichever your council is, make sure they've got your right name, make sure they've got your right address, and make sure that your nomination forms are up to date. And I know that's a whistle-stop tour. I'll answer any other questions on that as we go through. But if people want to come back to me with any other questions now, then I'm all ears.
Thank you, George. There were a couple of questions that have come through while you've been talking around the age limit. So you said that most people attending tonight will probably be retiring at 67. But some people are asking whether, is it right that they thought it was 55 that they would be able to if they've been working in local authority for longer?
If you've got membership in the pre-2014 section of the scheme, that section of the scheme had a retirement age of 60, and the earliest you could retire there in that scheme was 55. So if you have got some membership, if you've joined local government before 2014, then yes, you can retire from the age of 55 onwards. Okay. But the actuarial reductions would apply to a greater extent to you because you're retiring even earlier than the 10 years allowed for. So yes, you can in some circumstances retire from the age of 55, but your pension will be reduced further.
Thank you. And is there a difference between the retirement age for men and women? Can women retire earlier? That was the other question. Thank you.
Retirement age is the same for everybody.
And another question that came in was, is the career average scheme referred to as a care pension?
It is, yes. Career care stands for career average reevaluated earnings. So we don't go around saying that. We just call it the career average or the care section of the scheme. But yes, that's what it is, yeah.
Thank you. If you've left local government and moved to the civil service, would you still be eligible for the death grant under the previous pension scheme?
If you kept your pension in the local government pension scheme, you'd become what we call a deferred member, then yes, the death grant would still apply to you as long as you kept that in the scheme. Many people, though, who leave local government, and if they go to the civil service or the NHS, they take their pension with them and they add that to the new pension that they're going to get in either the civil service or the NHS. And they also have death benefits, and you would only get the death benefits in the NHS or the civil service. But if you keep your pension in the LGPS and set up a separate pension, then yes, as long as you've got membership of the LGPS, you would be entitled to the death benefits.
Thank you. What's the difference between APCs and AVCs?
AVCs are additional voluntary contributions. That's the one where you're just building up a separate pot of money that runs alongside your pension. You decide that you want to save up some more money to add to your finances or something, and you can just put in that as much or as little as you want. It gets invested in stocks and shares, and when you decide, it gives you a pot of money. It's flexible, it's tax-free, it invests in stocks and shares and gives returns, so it has advantages. That's AVCs, additional voluntary contributions, build up a separate pot of money. APCs, it's actually APPC, additional pension purchase. That's the one where you decide that you need an additional £1,000 a year, say, and you buy it. You buy that £1,000 a year with a one-off lump sum that is around 12 times the amount that you want. You buy it in tranches of £250, and you can buy a minimum of 250 and a maximum of, believe it or not, the maximum you can buy is £7,579. So it's AVCs versus APPCs. One's just a pot of money. The other one is an additional amount added onto your annual pension.
Thank you. We've got quite a few questions coming in.
Okay.
What would happen, and I think this has been asked by a couple of members, what happens if you're a single person and you die either in service and you've got children that are over the age of 23, 24, what happens to your pension? What happens about death in service if you're single?
Well, you can nominate your children to receive your death benefits. If your children are under 18, they would get the pension of 50% of the value of your pension. Sorry. If your children are under 18, they would get 25% of the value of your pension. Or if they're under 23 and in full-time education, they would get 25%. They can't get that over 23, but once they're over 23, you can nominate them as a person to receive whatever death benefits the pension fund gives you. So, for example, I mean, it's common that people get divorced, you know, so you don't want to leave anything to your ex, but you're happy to leave it to your children. So cross your ex-spouse's name off your nomination form and put your children on there. And you can do anything you want. You can put child number 1 gets 50%, child number 2 gets 25%, child number 3 gets 25%, or you can split it 33, 33, 33, or you can leave some to your gran, or you can leave some to your dog's home. Don't have to nominate a person, you have to nominate a thing, but you must nominate. Otherwise, as I say, either you have to go through probate, and there's all sorts of technical and legal issues. And if they can't find anyone through probate, thank you very much, the fund keeps the money.
Thank you. So we've had this question come in from Brian and Jackie. What's the 85-year rule, and is the 85-year rule still applicable, and can employers opt out of it?
So the 85-year rule only applies to people who've got pre-2014 membership. The 85-year rule ended in 2014. And the 85-year rule states that if the total number of years of membership in the scheme added to your age add up to more than 85, then you can retire, okay? So you might be 50 and you've got 35 years in the scheme, that adds up to 85. So you would be eligible to apply for the 85-year rule. It just makes you eligible to apply. It does not guarantee that the employer will give it to you. You are applying to the employer to be allowed to retire early, and it is up to the employer as to whether to allow you to go or not. It is at their discretion. The 85-year rule was introduced basically in the 70s and 80s to help employers make people redundant, and they wanted to get rid of the older people and pay them off on the pension. But since then, all of that stopped as councils have run out of money and can't afford the strain costs. Also, the other thing with the 85-year rule is you do not get a full pension out of it. You get 100% of the value of your pension for the pension you've earned between like 1986 and 1994. Then you get like 95% of the value of your pension that you've earned between like 1994 and 2001. And then you get 86% of the value of your pension from 2001 to 2014. So it gives you all these little tranches. So it gives you, all it does, the 85-year rule, is give you the right to apply for early retirement. It is at the employer's discretion as to whether to allow you to go, and then you don't get a full pension anyway. And you can go on the website, and there is a calculator on the website, And you can put in your details and it'll automatically tell you the amount of pension you would get if you were eligible to apply for the 85-year rule. And although people want to apply for it now, many people don't, because you're probably better off, depending on how old you are, just applying to retire early and taking an actuarial reduction of 4% a year. That probably won't be as much as the reduction you get in the 85-year rule. So yeah, it still applies, but there are very big caveats to the 85-year rule.
Thank you. Somebody's asked, if I retire and want just part of my pension, how much can I take and how much tax would I pay?
You can't do that. You have to take all of your pension. It's one pension. And I know it's in two sections, but if you retire, you have to take all of your pension. Okay. I hope that answers the question. All right.
It does. Thank you.
You have to take it all. As to the tax, if your pension is also subject to taxation, okay, there are threshold limits for individuals. Those thresholds relate to your age and to your employment status. So if you were like over 67 and retired and only in receipt of a small pension, you know, I think the threshold is 14,000, but don't quote me on that because the budget was today and they've all changed. You would be tax free. Anything over that, you would be taxed. But then if you retire, take your pension and go back to work and start earning a salary in addition to your pension, then you would be taxed again on the whole amount. And if your combined pension and new earnings add up to more than what your last lot of earnings were, there would definitely be an additional tax regime. And if you are thinking of doing that, you really should take independent financial advice before you take any further steps and see what your tax liabilities would be. Generally speaking, your tax liabilities will be the same as you are now, but it's only if you've got substantial other assets that the tax regime would change. You know, you might inherit another house or you might win the lottery or something like that. You know, these things make a difference. And they would also make a difference to any benefits you might be receiving, pensions credit, child credits, this sort of thing. If you're in receipt of rent allowance and stuff like that, any changes in your income affect them. So be careful about taking a pension and going back to work.
Thanks, George. This is one that's come up quite a lot, and that's around flexible retirement. So what's the process of flexible retirement, and can employers refuse requests for flexible retirement?
Well, yes, they can. Right. Flexible retirement means you want to retire, take your pension, and then go back to work. And generally speaking, you want to go back to work on a different contract. You either want to work in a different job or you want to reduce your hours. Okay. There's absolutely nothing to stop you retiring and take your pension as long as you meet the criteria of the scheme that, you know, are over 57 or over 55 and have got membership in the pre-2014 scheme. There's nothing to stop you retiring at all. The issue is going back to work. So if you want to do that, you need to have a conversation with your employer in the first instance, say, I want to retire and I want to come back to work. And then the employer will say to you, well, yes, Lisa, you can come back to work. You can come back to work full time. Or they could say to you, sorry, Lisa, I don't want you back full time. You've gone. I'm using your departure as a reason to restructure. I only need you 2 days a week or 3 days a week, and I haven't got a band 7 job. I've only got a band 6 job for you. They're the terms that I'm offering you. And then it would be up to you to decide whether to accept that or not. So nothing to stop you retiring, but it's at the employer's discretion as to the terms upon which you return to work. So before you make any decisions, just have the conversation with your employer and discuss what you're thinking with them.
Thanks, George. There's been a lot of interest as well in the AVCs. A couple of questions around those. The first one is, can AVCs be taken out before retirement? And the other one was, I think you mentioned about that there's no tax on the AVC payments, but is there a maximum amount that can be paid in?
You can only join AVCs while you're working because you have to be a member of the pension scheme, okay? And what we call an active member, not a retired member. So you can take out AVCs at any time you want that you're working. They're completely flexible and you can put in as much or as little as you want. If you want to put in £1 a week, you can put in £1 a week. If you want to put in £100 a week, you can put in £100 a week or more. And the tax-free element of them is that, as I said, we take the contribution to the ABCs out of your wages, and then we tax you on the remainder of your wages. So we tax you on a smaller amount, so you pay a little bit less tax and a little bit less national insurance. But yes, completely flexible, but you can only take them while you're a member of the scheme, not when you've retired.
Thank you. What happens with pension contributions when you take a career break?
That would depend on what sort of career break you are taking. If it was maternity leave, for example, or if it was a long-term illness, or if it was for caring responsibilities, then the pension contributions would continue to be made by the employer, but not by yourself. However, if you just wanted a year off to travel the world, then no pension contributions would be made for you. Okay, you're just taking a break and that's it. So there are some circumstances in which the employer would continue to make the contribution and circumstances in which the employer would not. And that would depend on the type of absence.
Thanks, George. This one is around the pension fund. Can councils borrow against pension funds for their general fund deficit? And can councils use pension funds to invest in commercial schemes?
No and no.
Okay, that's very straightforward then.
The pension fund is a completely separate fund. It is not a slush fund that the council can rely on in the case of it running out of money. That's our members' money that we put in a pension fund to pay you a pension. The council can't come and just borrow against it if it wants to. As simple as that. The fund is under the stewardship of its trustees, and they decide what to do with the money. The council could, for example, no, it wouldn't be the council. It would be the pension fund could decide to build council houses, for example, but only if it would get a return. But no, the council can't access the fund, no.
Okay, thank you. And this is probably quite pertinent to what you've just been saying. We've had a question come in from a member who's worried that the pension fund in a local authority has got a £68 million deficit. They're asking, should they be worried about the pension fund being in a deficit, or can this be rectified quite quickly? What happens in that scenario?
Are you going to tell me which local authority, or?
It's Newham.
I don't see why any council should be £68 million in deficit at the moment, to tell you the truth. All pension funds are doing well. Thanks to Liz Truss, who destroyed the economy, pension funds moved their money out of the UK and invested in more profitable areas. That money is now coming back to the UK. Overwhelmingly, most pension funds are in surplus. So it's interesting to see that there's 68 million in deficit. I wonder how our member knows that it's 68 million in deficit, and if they could share that information with me, I can raise questions about that at the local government scheme advisory board, which I'm a member of. But it's nothing to unduly worry about, because it's the local government pension scheme is one scheme. It's administered by 88 different authorities, some of which have a deficit, some of which have a surplus. At the end of the day, all that money is pooled together to give the total amount in the fund. At the moment, nationally, the fund is at about 128% in surplus. It's got about £350 billion worth of assets. So Newham is very much an outlier there. So it's done something that hasn't worked well. It won't affect your pension because the loss can be subsumed and managed in the larger pool, but we would want to have a look as to why it's got a £68 million deficit.
Thank you, George.
But thank you for raising that question. And if you can give me any more information about that, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. With regard to updating like the expression of interest, wishes and nominating. Can you do that digitally online?
Yeah, it's dead easy. Honestly, it's dead easy. You just go online onto the LGPS website. It says, which fund are you in? And you click newer. Then if you haven't registered before, you put your details in, your name, your national insurance number, that sort of thing. And then it just says expression of wish form. And you just literally type in there who you want the money to go to. It couldn't be any simpler. And while you're on there, check your name and check your address. Overwhelmingly, it's women that change their name when they get married. People move house and forget, people get divorced and it all just sits in the past. And we end up with loads and loads of money sitting in the fund. And I have members coming up to me saying, where's my pension? I don't know, and what have you. And it's just make sure it's up to date. It's the easiest thing in the world. It'll take you 5 minutes.
And would you also make the arrangements for your additional voluntary contributions for your AVCs? Would you do that through the LGPS website as well?
That's all done online as well. That's as easy as pie as well. Honestly, you just press the I want to do AVCs button. It says, how much do you want to put in per month? You click £10, job done. And then the following month, if you want to keep it at £10, don't do anything. But if you've got a big bill to pay, you can go in and change it to £1. And then when you get the back pay on your recent pay rise, you can put in £100. It's as flexible and easy as that. And it's all done online now, yeah.
Thanks, George. I'm just having a quick look through the questions here. We've covered the ones that people do have different retirement ages depending on date of birth. So people born in 1959 will have a different retirement age to someone born in 1980.
Yeah, but I think by 2028, everyone's retirement age will be 67.
Okay, but before then, people will still be retiring at 66.
Yeah, some older people, they will be able to retire earlier at 65, 66, and 6. So, for example, I've got a 64-year-old, and their retirement age is 64 and a half, whereas a 62-year-old, their retirement age is 67 because it goes up each year. So you can check it all. You can just go online and just type in what is my state pension age, and then you just put in your details and it'll tell you what it is. Overwhelmingly, for most people, it'll be 67 now.
And this is an interesting question. How easy is it for members to ascertain how ethically the fund is invested and the proportion of investment in various sectors?
It's reasonably easy because each fund you're in must publish an annual report and at least a triennial report every 3 years, but most of them do an annual report. And in that report, it will list the environmental, social, and governance factors that it has adhered to in its investment strategy. Okay. And these, what we call ESG, environmental, social, and governance considerations, are increasingly to the fore at the moment. There's campaigns to stop investments in fossil fuels. The Palestine Palestine Solidarity Campaign has campaigned hard to stop investments in Israel. And you can do all of this. The thing is, you can't make investment decisions on political grounds. You have to make investment decisions on financial grounds because you have to act in the best financial interests of your members. And what most people have been saying recently, with fossil fuels, for example, is what's the point in investing in fossil fuels? We've got to have a pension fund that lasts for 50 years, and fossil fuels will destroy the planet in 20. So there's no point investing in fossil fuels. It's not a political argument, it's an economic one. Same with Israel. You can't say I'm not going to invest in Israel because I disagree with their politics or what have you. But what you can say is, look at Israel at the moment. They're in a war. They're being attacked by Iran. It's an unstable economy. It's political instability. It's not a safe place to invest your money at the moment. So that's an economic reason to withdraw your investments. And there's a whole range of issues like this. It does cause consternation, but as long as you can abide by what we call the fiduciary duty, you must invest in the best financial interests of your members, you'll be okay. And each fund must publish at least an annual report about where it invests its money.
Thank you. We've got a member asking that they've got different pensions floating about from different previous employers. Is it possible to consolidate those into one place? And if so, how would they go about doing that? I think there's a window there, isn't there, for doing?
Generally speaking, if you join the LGPS, it will allow you to bring in other pensions within the first year of service. And if you're outside of the first year of service, they are allowed to provide a discretion and allow you to bring that money in at their discretion. It's very unusual for them to exercise that discretion without you giving a compelling reason as to why you haven't done it in the first place. I think also the fund doesn't allow all types of pension in. Okay, it would allow other what we call defined benefit schemes and other pensions from the public, what we call the public sector pensions club. If it's a similar scheme, if you just add 10 quid behind the sofa from 40 years ago, then it probably wouldn't allow you to do that because it would be too small. And if it does let you bring some money in, what it would do is, let's say you had £10,000 in another pension fund, it wouldn't add £10,000 to your pension. It would say that £10,000 represents 1.5 years of contributions. So we will add 1.5 years onto your pension that you're going to get. So it's a little bit complicated if you're outside the first year, and it's a little bit complicated if it's not a compatible fund, but it is possible in certain circumstances. And if you've got a compelling reason, then the fund is allowed to apply discretion.
Thank you. I think we've covered most of the questions being asked. Some are quite specific and personal, and we can follow those up afterwards. I mean, this is probably I don't know whether you'll be able to answer this question, George, but is there a comfortable pension limit that you need to live off? Is there sort of an ideal pension amount?
Okay. Those specific and individual questions, just please forward them to me by email and I will get back to the member. And other members, I'm free to give out my works mobile number, and I'm happy to have a chat with anyone about it. I've got no problem, email or conversation. On the second part, there is a rule of thumb that you should try and earn in retirement about 2/3 of what you earned while you were working. So if you're on £30,000 a year, you should try and earn as a pension £20,000 a year, bearing in mind that the state gives you £11,000 a year by way of state pension. So that leaves you to find the remaining 9,000. And the reason that they say 2/3 is, generally speaking, by the time of retirement, you've made all your big capital outlay. You've generally paid off your house, you've paid off your car, your three-piece suite, your kids have grown up and left home. You just don't need as much money as you did when you were working and had children and more mouths to feed and all of that, So they say, as a rule of thumb, about 2/3 of your should give you about the same sort of standard of living. Of course, you might want to improve your standard of living. You don't want to live at the same level that you've lived at, while you were working. So in that case, you could try and build up your pension through AVCs or APPCs or make other investments. Or you might just think, yeah, I'm not bothered, about it. I'm not going to get the 2/3. I'll just live on that and just have a meager existence. So it's a rule of thumb. But at the end of the day, everyone's different and has a different outlook on life, and people make choices about what they want to do.
And there was another question. Does the pension go up each year in line with inflation?
Yeah, whatever the rate of inflation is on the 1st of September, your pension goes up by that amount the following 1st of April. Okay.
Thank you. So I think we've covered most of the questions, unless there's any more that come in. What we'll do after this evening's webinar, we'll upload it, and next week, the first part of next week, I will send an email to all of you that have attended this evening and share the webinar. I will also share with you some slides that George has put together about the pension scheme, and I'll share with you George's contact details so that you can take him up on his very generous offer of advising you or supporting you how he can with any questions you've got regarding your pension. So I would like to say thank you very much for all attending this evening. I hope you found it useful. If you've got any questions, please send them through to me, or when you get George's contact details, please send them on to George. But if you want to contact me before next week, then please feel free to do so. Thank you all very much indeed.
All done. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, George.
You're welcome.
Thanks for your time this evening. Thank you.
No problem. Good night, everybody. Have a nice evening.
Good night. Bye.